Joined by former Secretary of State Michael Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, good morning. It's great to be with you.
Let's begin with Evan Gershkovich. What would you advise President Trump to do if Putin took a Wall Street Journal reporter hostage after he wrote a critical story about Russia's economy?
Well, there's much to be done to get him back, and the United States government has a responsibility to do that. I worked on lots and lots of these with Ambassador O'Brien when he was my hostage envoy. We know how to do it. We also know what not to do, right? They take Brittany Griner, a celebrity, they leverage her celebrity into getting back the merchant of death. Same thing happened, frankly, with Trevor Reed. This is a pattern in practice, and we can't reward that. So we should immediately make clear that there's no trade. We're not even going to have conversations about trade. This isn't to be discussed. Second, this is a form of open effort, cumulative effort on behalf of Vladimir Putin to leverage for his advantage, whether it's in Ukraine or elsewhere. This is his objective. We should deny him that. And there are lots of things. Call them what one will. Active measures. Cyber work that can be done. It can be done quietly. That can be work done in lots of spaces that impose real costs on, for example, everyone in the capture chain, from the guard to Vladimir Putin, who was involved in the taking of this American journalist who did nothing wrong. We should go after them. We should find out who they are, who their families are. We should begin to sanction them. We should make costs imposed on those who actually took these actions. And when you begin to do those things, not only will Putin change his behavior, but you've seen this with Iranians. We're watching the Chinese stop people from leaving the country. This will only escalate if we continue to appease by trading people that are of far more value to us than the people that the Russians or the Iranians or the Chinese pull from the streets wrongfully.
Now, Secretary Pompeo, I'm unaware that we've expelled one Russian in the aftermath of this. I don't want to take any Russians hostage and be a thug like Putin, but should we be expelling Russians in the United States under diplomatic immunity or whatever and barring others from coming?
Of course, you'll remember when the Trump administration, we had Chinese journalists that were conducting espionage here. We kicked them out. We began to P&G others who were connected to it. These are the kind of diplomatic efforts that can be engaged in. And so we should absolutely begin to do that. But make no mistake about it. And by the way, we shouldn't respond in kind. Your point is exactly right. We shouldn't become the kind of thug authoritarian nation that Vladimir Putin is. But what you have to make clear to them is that, here's another example that's going right now. The Iranians believe we're going to trade a hostage for $7 billion in money that has been held in Asia, frozen for Asia 4 years. And the deal that's being discussed is giving them $7 billion of access to capital in exchange for a hostage. You will end up with Americans stranded all over the world from nations like China and Russia and Iran continuing to take our folks.
Mr. Secretary, are you alarmed by the rapprochement by Saudi Arabia and Iran brokered by China? I mean, what is the Biden administration doing? It's falling apart.
We do appear to be having what is best described as a cascading series of crises. I think what's going on in the Middle East is certainly one of them. We had this right. We had created more peace, more prosperity in the region with what became the Abraham Accords. But the Biden administration's central flaw was the misunderstanding of the bad actor in the region. They called Saudi Arabia a pariah state, and then the Biden administration went and met with the Iranians to discuss a nuclear deal to give them money. That's dangerous for Israel, our friend and ally, but it's really bad for the United States of America, and you can see that playing out today. Look, what the Saudis are doing with the Iranians is to try to take the temperature down, trying to reduce risk, because they have lost confidence that the United States of America will do what we were doing for 4 years, recognizing the fundamental importance to American national security of the region, including the Emiratis, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, our Bahraini friends, all of whom host the Fifth Fleet. There's big U.S. presence in those places. These are countries that are prepared to allow the United States to protect itself. And the Biden administration chose the Iranians. It should come as no surprise that those nations will begin to engage in hedging behavior to provide security for their own people.
Mr. Secretary, I believe Beijing is the center of our problems and the new axis of evil, with Russia and Iran being the other two sort of outposts of that. But China is still the main threat. And during last week, they sanctioned the Reagan Foundation, which operates the Reagan Library, obviously, because the Reagan Foundation hosted the president of Taiwan. How ought we to respond? And I know you're sanctioned too, but how ought we to respond to that, trying to sanction American foundations for hosting the president of Taiwan?
Well, there are Chinese foundations strewn across America, in our universities, in our communities, all across the country. We ought to begin to impose costs on them, not merely reciprocal, but costs that exceed the benefit for Xi Jinping. So when he makes silly statements like sanctioning the Reagan Foundation, he will understand that it is not cost-free. I haven't heard the Biden administration say a single word about that. But
No, I haven't either. I looked.
Yeah,
it's not there.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I think you'd agree. This is a symptom, not the core problem. You're right. I'm sanctioned too. They're sending a message to the world: behave, defending freedom, support Taiwan, take actions to protect America, and we will impose costs on you. And that requires simple temerity to demand reciprocity and to make clear that we're not going to let the Chinese Communist Party control the next century. When you let them sanction a foundation, important foundation, a place that everyone goes to talk about freedom and the things that make America great, when you allow that to happen and do nothing, you will invite more aggression from the Chinese Communist Party, and we'll all suffer for that.
Mr. Secretary, I want to turn to the National Security Council publication of the U.S. Withdrawal from Afghanistan report. First of all, have you had a chance to read this nonsense yet?
I now have had a chance to read it all, Hugh. I read at least the summary that the NSC provided is what I've read, 12 pages, some 12 pages.
What do you make of it?
You know, it's outrageous, it's galling, and most importantly, it's a disservice to the men and women who served in Afghanistan for 2 decades. For them to try and shift blame to anyone other than Joe Biden, who was the man who made the decision to leave the country on a date certain, to kill 13 Americans and left countless Americans behind, is outrageous. I don't know of a parallel in American history where a president has caused so much harm to American national security and then attempted to blame everyone but himself. He blamed the intelligence community. He blamed the Trump administration. This is nonsense. And one of their core arguments was somehow that they were constrained by an agreement that we'd entered into during the Trump administration. What utter nonsense, what reckless, foolish language to tell the American people that this chaotic withdrawal wasn't chaotic and that somehow President Biden didn't have the freedom to make good decisions to defend America and our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. It's a silly document in so many ways. No one's buying that this wasn't Joe Biden's calamity. And I think the world is not buying that this wasn't a calamity, that American failure that day in the summer of 2020-21 wasn't a disaster for American national security.
National Security Council Deputy Spokesperson Admiral John Kirby said this on Thursday, cut number 17.
Get planes coming in and getting them loaded, have medical screening, have security vetting, have diplomatic presence on the ground to make sure that we're putting the right people on planes, but also defend that airport from external threats. That's pretty remarkable. And so for all this talk of chaos, I just didn't see it. Not from my perch.
I just didn't see it, Mr. Secretary. How'd you react to that?
Believe your eyes, Hugh, and the world believes their own eyes, and certainly American people believe their own eyes. The pictures proved the chaos, but the end result proves the chaos, too. European allies trusting us less, our adversaries saying that they can potentially invade a European country and America might not do anything. Those are the end result. It was certainly chaos, and I have a lot of respect for Kirby, but that was a foolish thing for him to say. He knows better. He knows that the debacle of the departure from Afghanistan is on the shoulders of the Biden administration. And for him to say, well, gosh, we protected the airport, an airport that was ultimately denied the very security that would have permitted us to get the Americans out that President Biden promised he would, is a travesty.
Last question, Mr. Secretary. On page 11 of the After Action report, they argue, more broadly, when the President Biden, made the decision to leave Afghanistan, some worried that doing so would weaken our alliances or put the United States at a disadvantage on the global stage. The opposite has happened. Has the opposite happened?
Let's see. We've spoken about the Russians taking a hostage, the Iranians close to a nuclear weapon, the Chinese now conducting exercises off Taiwan and flying balloons over our country, the Middle East now turning to Iran to protect itself from American failed leadership. I think the facts are pretty simple. We are in a more dangerous, less prosperous place than today than we were just 2 years and 3 months ago.
Secretary Mike Pompeo, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
You
Any announcements today, by the way?
No announcements. Hope you had a great Easter, Hugh.
All right, just checking in, obligatory check-in.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. Secretary. Have a great, great week.